Well, hello there. How are you guys? Good to see you. It's Sunday afternoon for me, and I'm a little late in the weekend getting you the material from Friday, your third and final lesson for the week. And let me talk a little bit about land, if I could, to lead up to a poem, which will lead to other things, if you stick with me. It's 38 degrees, getting a little hard to do these lessons outside. Because you're all so young, I want to say something clear and important if you haven't thought about it yet. You're all young compared to me. I hope you give a tremendous amount of thinking. Really think about where you want the setting for your story to be. Now later in this lesson I want to talk about the idea of literary settings, and I'm going to feel like a schoolmarm when I do that. But, you know, pause for a minute. This is America. You can pretty much get what you want. Where do you want the setting to be for your tale? Maybe it'll be a city. You know, I asked Friday morning people, how many of you want to live in a big city? Hands went up in the air. Maybe not. How about the suburbs? Maybe you want to sit in an apartment in the suburbs. I would never want to end up like that, but maybe that's, you know, happiness for you. Near lots of stores and restaurants. Some people love that. Some people are cut out for small town living, and I don't think that's quite me either. Only 1 year did I live in the town that I taught in, Little Falls, back in the 80s. I'm about no town, or to put it another way, I'm all about the township. Okay, when this great country, this struggling great country, was founded, the congressional orders decreed that the entire country would be divided up into townships. And I relate so strongly, I identify so strongly with the township that I live in. A township, in case you don't know, is 36 square miles, and I am a proud citizen of Section 7 in Collegeville Township, which is on the western edge. I'll give you a little more geology, kind of a real estate lesson. The township that I live in is tremendously hilly. The glaciers really did their work. And what's kind of interesting and ironic to me is that when the settlers came through here in the 1800s, it's kind of hard to talk when you're cold, this was the least desirable land possible. Super hilly, wooded land with lots of water, lots of ponds, lakes, rivers. The smart farmers just kept going because the prairie starts up about 15 miles to the southwest of where I live. The idiot farmers stayed here. You can't plow hills that are almost vertical. It's easy to turn prairie into farmland, but not this. So the guys that settled here were Germans and Poles, and they raised cows, because you can do that when it's really hilly. Let me speak just finally. There's a guy named Francis Schellinger that owned all this land. He was sort of the informal mayor of Collegeville, and he died not that long ago. He bought this land that I'm surrounded by right now for $48 an acre in 1966. Price of land's gone up quite a bit since then. It's not. Wasn't that rude? Some people just have, you know, like, no respect for teachers, educators, trying to make a living in a pandemic. I hope that doesn't happen again. Why am I thinking in this way? I'm thinking in this way because were I a fugitive, trying to get away from the law, this is the kind of land I would want to try to escape in. And I'm taking a little while, 4 minutes in, and I haven't told you the real truth of why I'm out here, why I'm thinking like this. We had a lot of excitement in our township on Thursday. Starting Thursday morning, a young black man in his 30s was pulled over for a routine DWI check over by St. John's, and, you know, he blew on the breathalyzer and it came up, you're a winner, you're hammered drunk at 10 o'clock in the morning. But instead of, you know, doing what he should have done, which is get in the squad car, he punched that officer. He punched that sheriff in the face just as hard as he could and ran into the woods. No, he got in his car and then tried to run, and then they put out spike strips which flattened his tires. And he ran into the woods near St. John's, and it shut down St. John's University and my old high school for 7 hours straight. And it really gave us pause in Collegeville. The whole campus locked down. brothers and sisters of mine, professors at St. John's, and teachers in my old high school were texting me. They're like, I'm still in my office at 7:30. It's 8 o'clock. I can't go home. And they got them by my old high school. There's that whole idea, right? If you run in the woods because one leg is likely longer than another, in the end, you're just going to circle back to where you were. And maybe that's what happened. And we all stood on our porches that night. I know I did. My land is like 3 miles through, as the crow would fly proverbially, through the air. 3 miles, and he could have been anywhere. And I'll run more miles than that this afternoon when I get done making this vid. So when I heard, here comes another car. When I heard that we had a fugitive in the woods, I started thinking about James Wright. James Wright, the father of Franz Wright. Boy, I'm getting kind of dark now, aren't I? I'm always fighting the light exposure. I'll keep talking. James Wright frustrated a lot of people in the late 60s because he wrote a number of poems that were elegies to fugitives, like men who had done like really bad stuff. And everybody was like, what is the matter with you, James Wright? I don't know where, if ever, anywhere, he explained that. But he wrote elegies. He wrote poems to recognize and honor the criminals. And I want to read one of them to you in honor of that guy, who they brought in, by the way. They caught him without bloodshed. They gathered him in, and I hope his story goes better. James Wright, to a fugitive. The night you got away, I dreamed you rose out of the earth to lean on a young tree. Then they were there, hulking the moon away, the great dogs snuffing up the grass. You raise a hand, hungry to hold your lips out of the wailing air, but lights begin spidering the ground. Oh, they come closing in. The beam searches your face like fingertips. Hurry, McGuire. Hammer the body down. Crouch to the wall again. Shackle the cold machine guns and the sheriff and the cars. Divide the bright bars of the cornered bone. Strip. Run for it. Break the last law. Unfold. Dart down the alley. Race between the stars. My goodness, is that beautiful. And holy cow, am I getting cold. I could have put on one of my big coats. Let's get back to our little study. Let's think of it as ours. And I've got some things to tell you. I want to tell you a secondary story about the idea of a fugitive and how it made a classroom pretty tense for me a couple years ago. I want to talk about setting, in particular, setting as it relates to literature. And the quick idea there is setting is never just setting. We always offer it as an element of literature. And the school marms and flower print dresses spend just a minute on it. It's a little more complicated than that. I also think it's as good a day as any to talk about another element of literature called plot. You've had that put before you too. And then there's 3 things that I want to tell you about the great William Faulkner, who's the third of 4 writers that we're going to study. And you've got some preparation coming your way. You're going to have to understand a very different kind of sentence. Different kind of sentence than what we've seen so far is Dream by Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway. There's no other writer like William Faulkner that I know of. He's just completely unique among the 20th century writers who won the Nobel Prize. And I want to talk about my origin story with him. I want to talk about how politically incorrect I am for offering Faulkner. One of these days I'm just going to get cuffed. And then we'll talk about the Faulkner sentence. So let's jump in my big truck and head back. I want to name a band for you. Isn't it pretty? I could sleep. I could sleep. I could sleep. When I lived alone, is there a ghost in my house? I could sleep. I'm not sure if those guys are still together. But I got the big hard drive out to try to freshen up my music here. And they were called Band of Horses, are called Band of Horses. Let's speak of all bands. Let's speak of all good bands in present tense. I'm not trying to be cool. So it's a little while later in the afternoon on November 22nd. I've done a couple things since we shot that first portion of this video lesson over on Schumann Lake Road. I guess probably every county in the world has a lover's lane, and that's what the old timers call that one. So I went running for 4.5 miles, and more importantly, I trimmed my eyebrows. I had the idea that if I trimmed them just perfectly, that I would look a little bit younger, maybe have eyebrows that are zoom-tastic. Only you would know whether or not that's working. In reviewing just the first clip, just to see what the light and sound looked like and stuff, there was a little bit of wind there. I just want to make a couple things clear. That guy that was a fugitive in the woods, he appeared to have a gun in his hand, right? So it wasn't just somebody running away from the police. It was a gunman, and he'd already smacked one guy in the face. And I'm not being political, but I can tell you, nobody in my little township here, all my neighbors, my beloved neighbors, were thinking that we should defund the police. We were really happy to have law enforcement keeping us safe. And I say that in honor of all the students I have up to Central Lakes College who are in law enforcement. That's a big program at my day job. I also, I think, insufficiently explain the irony of, real estate for one generation that is useless can be incredibly valuable for the next. And that's enacted in a novel that you might have heard of called Sula by Toni Morrison. I just wanted to say that. One epilogue to that story about the fugitive. I had a tense moment the last time I brought up the idea of a fugitive in a classroom, and there's been an interlude. And I brought it up on Honors Lit a couple of years ago, and there was a context. We were reading William Faulkner's Light in August, and there is a definite fugitive there that is on the run for over 100 pages. His name is Joe Christmas. And I spoke gently but clearly about the idea that it's human to have that flash thought. Yeah, we want fugitives brought to justice. What could be more important than law and order, decorum? But it is, I think, a natural-born thing to, for a split second, want them to get away. And I had a student get really upset. This can happen. Oh, her face got all red. I'm looking over here because she was over by the groovy courtyard window where she liked it and liked to sit. And she got all upset but didn't say a word about it. And then the next day she came in red-faced again, kind of halfway through a spring semester, Honors Lit, the great books. And she let me know that she wanted to address the class at the end, the last couple minutes. And I said, okay, Casey, but it looks like you got trouble in mind. And she said, she just repeated the idea, I want to address the class. And she did. She stood where her seat is when I said, yeah, take the wheel. 48 minutes later, and she had a couple minutes to speak, and she stood up with a notebook, but her hands were trembling, and she was all upset, and she needed to report to the class that she had been triggered by the previous class because, well, I guess I'm talking about nothing but miserable stuff so far. Let's switch it out in a minute. She recalled the idea that many of us know down here that we had a shooting not that long ago at the St. Cloud Hospital. A guy from Pierce, Minnesota, who did nothing but raise hell in that town, found himself in a hospital room with a deputy, Stearns County Sheriff, and he assaulted him. 1 minute he was sitting quietly, and the next minute he attacked the guy and got his gun away from him and shot him dead in the hospital room. And she commanded me to apologize, told the class that she had no idea that that I would know that she was connected to that. I think it was her boyfriend's uncle. And I said very gently to her, you know what? That did touch my life. My wife was 30 feet away from that gun blast. She was a charge nurse, right upstairs, right above where this happened. And I let her gently know that while I'm prepared to be inspired, if not transformed, by the thoughts of an 18-year-old consciousness, my thoughts are not going to be patrolled, policed by that. And she left the college a week later. I don't think I was the cause of that effect. She was having all kinds of trouble. All right, let's move on here. I want to say a couple things about setting and plot. Not that big of a deal and not that complicated. And it's just basically this. If some of you are going to be readers, some not, and it's okay. I love you both. If you're going to Netflix your way, to the big supernova, that's fine. But for those of you that are serious readers, that might take literature seriously, I want to point out to you that the setting is never just the setting. Setting has a kind of whatness, almost a consciousness. and I'll be re-putting this idea before you in the last week of the semester when we take in Thornton Wilder's Our Town. It's just not the place where the story happens. It's just far more than that, and I always feel like I'm sucking it, laying my hands on this. One way of thinking of it is and I'm really geeking out now. I have a book here. I could prove it. It's called The Town in American Literature, which is and it's a really thick book that takes a look at the idea that the town is also a character in many instances. And you'll definitely see that in Thornton Wilder's Our Town. Now, if you live in a small town, that is going to feel like home to you. There is a moment where the stage manager, who's almost like a god, says to the audience, "We like to know the facts about everyone in our town." I also want to, so that's a big deal, and it's a big deal in your real life too. Pick a great place to live. I sure did, and I've never regretted it. Now, regarding plot, I can't remember if we talked about this. My captive charges Friday morning couldn't remember if we'd breached the subject. One class said no, then the 10 o'clock class said, well, maybe a little, so let's just go fast. I don't know how many plots there are, but we're not that complicated. Human beings are not that complicated. Right? Boy meets girl. I like that plot. Boy meets girl, but there's trouble because the girl's going out with another boy. Story of my life, and it's the story of half of all things in literature. I like that plot too. That's interesting because now we got something called a love triangle. So it's striving, infidelity, revenge. There's only so many plots. Kind of similar to the idea that we only have so many emotions. But just to fill you in, there was an Englishman years ago named E.M. Forster who I do not recommend. Howard's End was probably the most boring novel I read as an undergraduate student at St. John's. He was still important. And here's what he did. He sat in his office one day and tried to figure out on the Thames River how many total plots there were. Total. He came up with 36. He couldn't think of a 37th. Then he wrote an essay called The 36 Plots. Haven't read it in years, probably should get back to it and give it another chance. So Forster says there's 36. Jorge Luis Borges says there are 3. The story of the Iliad, the story of the Odyssey, of Odysseus trying to get home. And even though Borges was a marginal Buddhist, he proclaimed that the story of the Gospels, I'm hiccuping because I'm drinking orange juice, which is always a mistake teaching online. He proclaimed that the Gospels were the stories that would loom far above the Iliad and the Odyssey in importance. Now, I let a couple honor students know Friday morning, honor students coming at me this spring, that we're going to read the Iliad. We are kicking off 2021, and Lord knows what will happen to us that year, given what's happened to us so far this year. My answer is, let's read the Iliad. Let's kick it off with 12,000 lines of blank hexameter verse. It's really thick. We're going for it. It's an adventure story about a hero and all the trouble he goes through trying to get home. Borges says, he says 1,000 years from now, even though the stories of the Gospels will be painted, sculpted, danced about, retold again and again, he says it just isn't going to get any better. This is an Argentinian atheist saying about as good as it gets is the story of Christ being tempted in the desert by the devil. I think there's only one plot. One. And this is a Jeff Johnson thought. This ain't out of any book. Great stories to me are always a working out of either salvation or condemnation. And I know I always talk like this, but I think it's true. Like Jay Gatsby getting shot 4 times in that novel by George Wilson as he's piteously heading towards his pool when he's got 5 minutes to live. Is that salvation? I don't think so. I think he's a failure in the end. I know other English teachers argue otherwise. Meanwhile, Francis McComber, he's totally saved, even though he has his head blown off by Margot at the end of The Short Happy Life of Francis McComber. That's just me. So I've said something about setting, I said something about plot, and I think I've fulfilled my obligations to an international organization I belong to called POEM. The Professional Organization of English Majors. It's a very important acronym to me. I'm a card-carrying member. 3 things about William Faulkner, and then we got to dial in on a sentence here. I got an origin story, I got to say something difficult and gentle and clear. And I got to show you a Faulkner sentence, because you guys got to get ready for this. The origin story is relatively simple. In 1990, I was teaching, just getting my career going at St. John's Prep School, and I got called into the office of a priest named Ian Dahmer, Father Ian. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I remember it was March. I'm young, right? And he let me know that a priest, a fellow English department member of mine, like 2.5, a department of like 2.5, little school, a lot littler now because I wrecked it. He wanted to tell me that Father Alan Tarleton had lost control of AP English, and that he hadn't handed any writing back in months. Sound familiar? And he was also doing weird stuff in class. Like, he showed a Stanley Kubrick film in the middle of a William Faulkner novel called Light in August that had nothing, believe me, nothing to do with the novel. And it created this crazy tension for me, because holy cow, did I want that class. You know, I was just kind of getting my hands on gear. We own these classes, in case you don't know. We're not just assigned to them. Like at CLC, I own Honors Lit. I own Intro to the Humanities. I own Classical Mythology. I'm the proprietor. And this guy had this class. He was also one of the most incorrigible priests at St. John's, who did some really bad stuff to a lot of victims. And in case Valerie's Pete is nearby, I don't even want to talk about it, but it was added with SEX. It was terrible. And we were on the news, that high school, the following year for that. Many fallen priests there who did bad stuff, my former employers. So I told him, I'll absolutely teach that class. You guys decide over the weekend. And he met me at the door Monday morning, and he said, okay, the class is yours. If you do a good job with it, you can teach it as long as you want. And I was so excited. And I know there's subscribers to this channel, like Swan Simonson, who you were in one of those sections. You know what that class was like for 19 years. You get it, Swan. And then later that day, we had the weird, I felt like kind of betrayal, and yet not, because he didn't want to do it. And he didn't want to teach the class from the beginning. And he brought him in, apologized to him, said he never wanted to teach the class, and he was like, here's your new teacher. And then I had the spot where I was like, okay, what do we do? Do we finish the book that you're in, or start up a new project? There was no one ambivalent about William Faulkner. The class was divided almost 50-50 into students who adored him and students who hated him. The students who adored him were like, this is the greatest novel we've read in high school. What are you talking about? We can't drop this project. And the other half of the class, like 16 students, were like, oh, could you just make this stop? Their attitude was, they hated it. And it was so weird to me that no one was just shrugging their shoulders. Nobody just kind of in the middle. So I made a snap decision. I collected all the novels and I gave them Albert Camus' L'Étranger, The Stranger, because it was short and readable, and I figured we could get going. And I just had all kinds of trouble because they were seniors with senioritis. To watch out for that if any of you are seniors. And if you're juniors, there's something called junioritis. And to cut to it, later that year, I got them graduated, and I went over to my old high school one day. One Saturday morning, my wife was at work doing a long shift. And I grabbed a few things, and I grabbed that novel. And I went back to my old house, our old cabin in the woods. I hopped over a farm to get here. And I sat down, and I intended on my old screen porch to read just a few pages of William Faulkner's Light in August. I read the whole thing in one day, you guys. I might have stopped for a sandwich or a little bit of juice, but I read that monster novel, over 500 pages in one day. I've never done anything like that in my life. That was back when, BC, period of our lives, before children. That was back when I had an attention span. And you'll probably disbelieve this. The next day, Sunday, I got up and did it again. I reread the entire novel. And William Faulkner, I'm not as obsessed with him as I used to be. I named a child after him, etc. One of my sons. But I remain devoted to his importance. And I'm going to keep naming him as one of the great writers of the 20th century as long as I get to do this work. And I wanted you to know that story. I think I have more about this to say later on, but the N-word occurs in William Faulkner. And let me say a general thing first, and if this is politically incorrect, then I guess I'm politically incorrect. Nobody's teaching Faulkner these days that I know of. I'm the dinosaur of the department, so I'm the one running, Aeschylus, Chaucer, Dante, Shakespeare, the big books. And I think I'm pretty much the only one running Hemingway. Scott Fitzgerald and William Faulkner. Our country is losing its mind, you guys. At Cornell, they've decided that the idea of having an English department is racist. So they changed the name of the department. It's now called the Department of Various Literatures. And I'm hosting Valznia Mort, a Cornell English professor and a poet from Russia, from Belarus. I'm going to keep real quiet about it the day that I host her in Minnesota, virtually. Huckleberry Finn, across the country, is being banned again because the N-word occurs in that novel 242 times. Well, that's happening in school districts and libraries because the country's going nuts, and those people don't even understand Mark Twain or who he was. That was a book against racism. And right here, all I want to say is that this is complicated. You can't sanitize the history of a country by knocking over statues of Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and William Faulkner. I'm sure he's getting knocked over too. You can't knock a Columbus statue over and think that you've made history any clearer. It's too complicated. So today, just today, the main thing I want you to know is that William Faulkner is from the South, the deep South. I'm a Northern guy. I never think about the Civil War. If you're a Southern guy, you think about it all the time. And probably the thing I want to emphasize right now is, yes, Faulkner probably had a racist streak or two when he was young. It is important to know that by the end of his life, he was a champion of civil rights. I mean, the United States sent him around the world as an ambassador for civil rights. That was a disaster because he was drinking so much, but I at least want you to know that. And if you're offended because the N-word occurs in this literature that I'm putting before you, I'm not saying I'm not sensitive to it. I've got more to say on this, but it might be one of those see the dean situations. You might be triggered. We never had triggering. We didn't even have it as an idea conceptually in the 70s. We just sort of, I feel like I'm editorializing now. I think we had thicker skins, you guys. I love you to death, but what am I saying right now? How about if I go on to the next topic and well, let's end this. When I say William Faulkner is like no other writer, I got to get this up so I can read it. What I'm really talking about is William Faulkner at the level of the sentence. I'm sorry, I'm goofing up here. We've been here before. I've told you that writing is not that complicated in the end. This ain't brain surgery. When we write, we fill slots, syntactically and semantically. It's that simple. Again, to repeat the idea, the smallest unit of meaning is the word. If you pile enough of those together, you get a sentence. And again, I used to think that getting students interested in words was the way to get them to be interested and motivated to be writers. Wrong. Words can point everywhere and nowhere at once. If you want to be a writer, you are going to have to learn how to like, if not love, reading sentences, inhabiting sentences, studying sentences, and figuring out how they work. There's no other way. You pile enough sentences together, you get a paragraph, and pile enough of those together, and you got all kinds of stuff. You could have any kind of text, which is the next level. But let's make a basic distinction. Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote sentences that were relatively periodic. And you can think about that Lanham video that I didn't emphasize enough this semester. I might have to inflict that on comp too for revenge. A periodic sentence is relatively safe and relatively short, but William Faulkner's sentences are accumulative or cumulative. They build up. They have multiple clusters, all right? I don't know anymore the difference between a phrase and a clause, and I don't even care. All I think about are clusters. Now have a look at this sentence. And if this has a run-on equality to you, I get it. I understand you. But this is not a run-on. This sentence is genius. The dogs were there first. 10 of them, huddled back under the kitchen. Himself and Sam squatting to peer back into the obscurity where they crouched. Quiet. The eyes rolling and luminous. Vanishing. And no sound. Only that effluvium which the boy could not place yet. Of something more than dog. Stronger than dog, and not just animal, just beast even. You do not need a complicated sentence to handle something necessarily complicated. I lost something here. I gotta hang on. Sorry, I lost the thing that I need. You don't need a complicated sentence to deal with something complicated, something sophisticated to deal with something sophisticated. Sometimes you need like an elegant, complicated sentence to explain something just simple. This is just a little boy in the bear from Go Down to Moses. He's under a porch with some dogs. The effluvium means funky smell, by the way. I had to look that up one long ago. Hemingway just would have said Sam was under the porch with some pretty smelly dogs. Well, if you're Faulkner, you can't think like that. And when we look under the hood of this, look at this thing when we break it up and study the clusters enclosed by, demarcated by punctuation. And look how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 clusters. And this is Faulkner. You guys got to get ready for this. Sometimes the sentences can go 4, 5, 6 pages. The phone rings in the other room and you have to start over. Word to the wise, because some of you are getting there right now. When I see a bright writer, a really bright young person who's done a lot of reading, sometimes I see the clusters getting long. Because the student has figured out how to pile meaning onto meaning onto meaning. And as Shakespeare would say, sometimes their endings do forget their beginnings. Tiny writing lesson from a fake writing teacher. I'm a little person, a literature person. I'm little too. I don't have a lot of real clear ideas about writing, other than you just should read your butt off if you want to become a writer. The trick of good writing, the trick of great writing, is to keep those clusters short and concise and balanced. And that is not easy to do. That, I can guarantee you, is not, and it takes work and a little talent. Let's end by just me completely boasting. Look at my wood pile, you guys. I think I might have overdone it, and yet I think I want to haul more wood up to the house. The pandemic has made me just want to get tons of food and firewood and everything I would need for what appears to be emerging, a totalitarian state. I'm staying cheerful anyway. God bless you guys. You know I love you. And we have 2 lessons this week and then Turkey Day. I will reveal the secrets of my Thanksgiving dinner live from my kitchen if I can get it cleaned up. And I hope it gives you some ideas for your Thanksgiving. And I hope you have one that can't be beat, even in the calamities of the day. Stay safe and stay warm. It's getting cold.